Hi everybody, welcome back to another Addiction in America episode. We're on episode 5. Today we're going to be talking about the commercials. So let's get into it. There's a strange romance in this country. A love story we don't talk out loud about, but one we all can recognize. It's in our movies, our music, our living rooms, our refrigerators, our childhood memories. It's the relationship that America has with alcohol and tobacco, two of the deadliest drugs we've ever embraced, and somehow the ones we've dressed up probably the most beautifully of all of them. We didn't just legalize them, we glamorized them, we marketed them. We invited them into our homes like they were our friends. And in episode 5, we're going to talk about how that romance was built and why it's still killing us. So here's the love story, right? America didn't fall in love with alcohol and tobacco by accident. We were sold a fantasy. Whiskey wasn't just a drink, it was masculinity in a glass. Cigarettes weren't just nicotine, they were rebellion, sex appeal, and freedom rolled into paper. We grew up seeing the Marlboro Man riding into the sunset, movie stars lighting it up like it was a part of their personality, champagne and music videos, beer commercials during the Super Bowl, tequila brands owned by celebrities, neon beer company signs in every bar, branded coolers and coasters in our parents' kitchens. These weren't decorations, they were advertisements, and they were everywhere. Alcohol and tobacco weren't just products, they were identities. But here's the uncomfortable truth: alcohol and tobacco kill more Americans every year than every other illegal drug combined. But we don't treat them like dangerous substances. We treat them like they're our cultural accessories. We don't whisper about them. We don't have to access them through shady tunnels and avenues. We display them proudly at weddings, birthdays, funerals, holidays, sporting events. We don't hide them from children. We keep them in the fridge, on the counter, in the garage, sometimes in a fridge dedicated solely to them, or on our patios and coolers. We don't question their presence. We question the people who don't use them. That's the power of marketing. It's also the power of normalization. It's the power of a romance that's been building for decades. Now, the Marlboro Man, when we talk about him, he wasn't a cowboy. He was an actor, a model, a symbol created in some boardroom somewhere to make more money. What he represented was rugged independence and American freedom. He also represented stoic masculinity and the open road and the myth of the self made man. And millions bought into that image. Literally millions. Several of the men who played the Marlboro Man died from smoking related illnesses. The symbol of freedom was dying from the product he was selling, but the image was too powerful to question. Fast forward to today, we don't have the Marlboro Man anymore. We have celebrity alcohol brands. Actors, musicians, influencers, they're all selling. And what they're selling is tequila, vodka, whiskey, hard seltzers, canned cocktails, not as drinks, but as lifestyles. You're not just buying alcohol, you're buying confidence, status, belonging, sex appeal, the illusion of control. It's the same playbook, it's just updated for the social media era. If you grew up in America, you would probably remember some of these things: a cooler in the garage with a beer logo on it, coasters with cigarette brands, neon sign above your bar, even the one in your house, a branded clock in the kitchen, a lighter, a Zippo with a logo on it, a free T-shirt from a bar. These weren't just random objects; they were advertising artifacts. Companies gave them away for free because they knew that if they could get into our homes, they could get into our habits. And once something becomes a habit, it's basically invisible. Alcohol kills about 140,000 Americans every year. Tobacco kills about 480,000. So that's over 600,000 deaths annually just in America from the two drugs we celebrate the most. But we don't see the deaths. We see the commercials. We see the parties. We see the lifestyle. We're engaged in the romance. The marketing is designed to make the danger feel distant and the pleasure to feel personal and achievable. But here's the thing: the real addiction isn't necessarily the substance in this issue, it's the identity that's attached to it. Because we're addicted to a couple of things. We're addicted to feeling cool and feeling included and grown and rebellious and relaxed. and like we belong to something that's bigger than ourselves. Alcohol and tobacco don't just alter your body, they alter your image. And in America, image is everything. When the billboards came down, so here's how it went with tobacco specifically. Tobacco, they had radio and television ads, and then the government said, okay, you can't do that anymore, and so then um, they had billboard and like magazine ads, and then those came down in the 1990s. Cigarettes companies couldn't advertise on TV or radio anymore, so they turned addiction into a loyalty program. Think about Marlboro Miles offering jackets, duffel bags, camping gear, all branded red and rugged. Every pack was a step towards a prize. Every cigarette became a point of pride. Cool Points targeted younger, more urban audiences with hoodies, headphones, and concert tickets. It wasn't about smoking, it was about belonging. The Marlboro Man rode off into the sunset, but his legacy stayed in our mailboxes. Addiction became achievement, self harm became membership. After billboard bans, tobacco brands went underground into bars and clubs. You might remember the Camel Girls appearing with scanners and smiles and short shorts and tight shirts, offering free packs of chocolate mint cigarettes if you let them scan your ID at the bar. That scan verified age, but it also built a marketing database, names, demographic, habits, all tied to the nightlife culture. The pitch wasn't smoke this, it was be part of the scene. Chocolate mint wasn't about flavor necessarily, it was about novelty, rebellion, belonging. The same emotional levers, just dressed for the club. And when the billboards came down, the brands just came inside. They didn't need commercials anymore. They had their own ambassadors. Addiction wasn't sold in stores, it was handed out in bars, wrapped in mint, and marketed as part of the nightlife. When the cigarette ads faded, Hollywood picked up the torch. Kind of going in the alcohol direction. Now, you talk about Sex and the City gave us Sarah Jessica Parker, cosmopolitan in every sense of the word, sipping pink cocktails that became shorthand for sophistication and self-expression. The Cosmo wasn't just a drink, it was a character trait. Then came Mad Men, and with it, a new nostalgia. Don Draper's Manhattan wasn't just whiskey and vermouth, it was power and glass, a ritual of control and charisma. Television didn't need to sell alcohol directly. It sold the fantasy of drinking beautifully, the same way the Marlboro Man sold smoking as freedom. We stopped watching the commercials, but we kept watching characters who lived the commercials. The glamour didn't die, it just evolved. From billboards to bar scenes, from jingles to dialogue, and from slogans to scripts, the romance has always stayed alive. And then came the pandemic, and the romance turned into dependence. When the world shut down, alcohol didn't. Bars were closed, but liquor stores were staying open. Restaurants couldn't see customers, but they couldn't deliver cocktails to people's doors. We called it essential. We treated alcohol like medicine for isolation. In a moment when human contact was forbidden, we delivered intoxication into people's homes. A coping mechanism disguised as convenience. We couldn't hug each other, but we could toast alone. It was the clearest proof yet that America doesn't just tolerate addiction, it institutionalizes it. Alcohol became the sanctioned escape, the socially acceptable sedative for collective anxiety. And when the lockdowns lifted, the habit stayed. We had normalized drinking as self care. We turned coping into commerce. We made escape a subscription service. The pandemic didn't create new addicts, it revealed how deeply addiction already lived in our lives and our culture. Behind every delivery app and curbside cocktail was the same message: you deserve this. You've earned this. You need this. And maybe that's the most dangerous commercial of all, the one that we never turn off. I'm a bartender by trade. I've poured thousands of drinks, watched thousands of nights unfold. And maybe that makes this conversation feel a little hypocritical for you, talking about addiction while standing behind the bar. But here's the truth: I'm not a drinker. And I don't say that with pride or with judgment. But what I can tell you, I can say it because it gives me a strange kind of clarity. I see what alcohol does, not just chemically, but socially. I see how it turns celebrations into rituals, and rituals into habits, and habits into identity. Behind the bar, I watched people use alcohol for everything: to loosen up, to forget, to connect, to cope, to celebrate, to survive, to just get through the moment. And during COVID, that pattern went national. Bars were closed, but alcohol was declared essential. We delivered it to people's homes with such urgency, like they couldn't live without it. And some couldn't because they were so highly addicted. Um, it was bad. We treated intoxication as therapy for isolation. We couldn't gather, but we could drink alone and call it normal. That's when I realized alcohol um, isn't just sold to America, but it depends on it. We build an economy around the escape. We build a culture around coping. We build an identity around intoxication. And maybe that's why this episode matters, because when you stand behind the bar long enough, you start to see the truth. People aren't chasing the drink, they're chasing the feelings that the commercials promise: freedom, confidence, connection, relief. But those things don't live in the bottle, they live in the space between who we are and who we're trying to be. And that's where addiction hides, and that's where recovery begins. So, in closing, we have to ask why. Why does our government treat addiction to tobacco and alcohol like a romance, and addiction to anything else like moral bankruptcy? Why do we celebrate the addictions that make money and criminalize the ones that don't? Why do we call one a lifestyle and the other a crime? We've built an economy that depends on addiction, a culture that glamorizes it, and a justice system that punishes it depending on who might profit from it. Maybe the real question isn't why people get addicted. Maybe it's why we keep designing a world that needs them to be. And we talked about this from the very first episode. The most dangerous drugs in America aren't the ones we criminalize. They're the ones that we've been told over and over again that it's okay to be in love with. Our government treats alcohol and tobacco as romance because they're profitable, predictable, and taxable. They fit neatly into the economy. They fund advertising, sports, entertainment, and even healthcare through sin taxes. They're woven into the system, not outside of it. Other drugs, though, they threaten that system. They're harder to regulate, harder to monetize, and easier to criminalize. So instead of managing them, we moralize them. We turn addiction into a character flaw when it doesn't serve the market, and into a lifestyle when it does. It's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. Addiction that pays is tolerated. Addiction that disrupts is punished. We don't fight addiction, we curate it into what we want it to be. So maybe the real question isn't why our government romanticizes certain addictions, but who benefits from keeping that romance alive? Next week, on Addiction in America, episode 6, we're talking about the people who profit from it, the ones who turn dependency into business, the ones who build empires on that pain. We'll look at Big Pharma, we'll talk about Oxycontin, we'll talk about cartel interventions, the supply chains, and how addiction is its own economy. Hope to see you then.